Hey friends, it's Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today for another Fandom Friday video. This week I'm using this adorable stamp set from Simon Says Stamp called Once Upon a Dream, and it features some of the cutest little princesses. It is designed by Alberto Gava. I hope I said his name correct. Who I absolutely admire his coloring and his designs on Instagram. So I tend to collect his stamp sets with Simon Says Stamp. And I'm really excited to color Princess Aurora today in her proper blue dress. She wears blue, thank you very much. But I absolutely love her. She's my favorite. So I wanted to color her in her three little fairies today. So I'm starting with my skin tones. I started with OR 2.2 and I've moved on to my mid-tone of OR 4.2. And then the lightest color I'm going to do is OR 2.0. I will do a lot of sets of three today, especially on my larger princess here because she has a lot of coloring space. For the smaller things, they will be 2 to 3 depending on how I like the color combination, how things are blending. For the gold color, I'm using YO 2.7 and YO 2.5. I'm going to use those later on the little stars as well. For her hair, I'm going to stick with those same YO shades. So I'm going to start actually with my darkest color, YO 2.5, and I'm going to go around and add color through her hair, following the design pretty much as close as possible on where to add shadow. So you could see as her hair layers on each other, there's different movement and lines through the hair. So I'm using those as a guide of where to add my shadows and then later my mid-tone. So I'm adding shadow at the bottom of her bangs, at the bottom of her hair where it goes on her, under her neck, as it curves around the back of her head. So anywhere where I think there would be shadow, um, opposite of where I think light would hit her hair, that's where I add the darkest color. My mid-tone, I'm bringing in YO 2.3, and I'm just going back over where I colored the darkest color and bringing it out, trying to blend the two and then extending the color towards the middle of where I'm leaving the lighter parts of her hair. And finally, I'm going to color everything in with YO 2.2. I go over what I've already colored again to try to blend, make it look as seamless as possible between the shades, and then extend and color into the centers where I think it should be the lightest. I decided to add little cute pink cheeks, but I just did R 0.2 right now. It will dry back quite a bit, and I'm going to darken them up at the end. The collar is white, so I did Cool Gray 0.1, I believe, or was it 0.2? Let me check. Okay, so CG0, just 0, just as like a shadow to that white part. Her bodice of her dress is B2.6 and B2.4. I'm going to do that same for the under part of her dress since that's kind of going to be like a shadow of her dress. And then the gown part is now a little lighter. So instead of starting with 2.6, I'm just using B2.4 to be the darkest part. So I only did 2 colors for the bodice of the dress and under the dress. But as you can see, this gown part is quite large. So I will add in a third color. So 2.4, again, just like I did with the hair, following the design of the dress, giving it shadow, but then using this darker shade to also add a little bit more dimension to the dress, like it's kind of curving and rippling. And then the mid-tone, I did B2.2 and going over what I already colored and extending those shadows out. I did leave a little bit of white space for that third color, which will be B2.0. And again, just going to color everything and fill in those lightest parts of her dress where I think light would hit it as she's kind of twirling in this image. I'm going to repeat those same colors for her sleeves. They do match the gown part of the dress, or the bottom part of the dress, so I'm going to color those the same. So B 2.4, 2.2, and 2.0. that will finish her up. And as you can see, her cheeks have really kind of disappeared. So I'm going to bring in a darker shade of red. So after I finish that, I'm bringing R 0.3, but then I'll go back with that 0.2 again and blend it out. So I did a little dab of the darker color and then blended it out. And I think that just gives the cheeks a little bit more color and personality. So I am using again those YO colors. I thought I did 2.7, but I did 2.5 and 2.3. So they're slightly lighter than the gold of her crown and more the same gold as the darker shades of her hair. So when those are done, I'm going to go back and forth about which fairy I want to start with, but I'm going to go with the green one, which is Fauna, I believe. Yes, Fauna. So I'm going to use kind of more limey greens for her. So Y 8.6 is a dark shadow, and while that is the only Y, I'm going to move into YGs. It still gives a good shadow base for the YGs. So again, Y for the darkest shade, and then I'm bringing in YG. So 2.5, 2.3, and 2.1 are the colors I'm going to use. Um, I'm not going to talk too much about my coloring since I did for my princess. I'm just following the same techniques, using the design as how to add the shadow. Just picking a light source. And honestly, I don't, sometimes my light source changes. Like right now, it's at the front of her hat, but it's also in the middle of her cape. I don't know. I just color how I like to color. I sometimes forget where my light source is, but I'm just thinking as the card receiver, you are the light source, which sounds so beautiful. You are the light source. But that's kind of what I use as a guide when I color. I just imagine, unless there's a sun on my card, that the light source is kind of just in the front center. So while I continue coloring, let's catch up. Can you believe that we're in December? It's so wild. This year has certainly flown by, which I know you'll probably hear on every YouTube channel this month. I'm not really doing anything special for December this year. I did not buy any advent calendars. I enjoyed making the shorts last year, and I did some lives in my Facebook group with a second advent calendar, but it was busy. It was hard to make sure I set time to go live and to record shorts. So I didn't do it this year, but there are a lot of crafty friends who are doing advent calendars. If you need a recommendation, let me know. I have, like I said, a couple crafty friends that I craft with on my the Spellbinders lives that we do. If you missed that or you don't know what I'm talking about, check out my live video from what was it, Sunday this month, Sunday. But yeah, so no dailies, no nothing on my channel. I do make Christmas cards all year round, as you know, on the 25th of the month or around the 25th of the month, I do try to put out a Christmas video. You will still see probably some Christmas cards from me this month. But I am getting more into the Valentine mood, I guess. So probably a few lovey-dovey style cards as well. Of course, Fandom Friday. Let me know if there's anything that you would like to see for a Fandom Friday. If you have any specific requests, a specific company or stamp set, or maybe I know that we don't always have the same stamp sets. Like you might have a Princess Aurora from a different company, but hopefully my coloring today gave you some inspiration, especially if you also have Olo markers. But let me know. Give me your thoughts. Give me your feedback. I am sensitive though, so constructive criticism. Anyway, but yeah, let me know if there's anything you'd like to see in the future. I'm going to move on to coloring Flora next, who is the kind of more pink. I do lean a little bit more into the red with my coloring for her. But I absolutely love how Fauna turned out. The greens, I did a lighter skin tone and a lighter gray hair, and I'm using like blue grays for their wings. I did bring in a light yellow color for the wands, so they just match the rest of the gold on the images I've been coloring. For nope, that's the green. Flora, I'm going to give her kind of more of a darker skin tone. As you've you've probably heard in my other videos, I try to mix up my skin tone coloring. I did color Aurora to look like me because that's why I love her so much. She is, looks like me. But for my fairies, I do like to practice mixing up my skin tones. So while Fauna is a little bit more on the pale side, I'm going to give Flora a little bit darker skin tone and then even darker for Merryweather. So if you do need any inspiration with your Olo markers for different skin tone shades, hopefully one of these will inspire you. So I did use darker greens for the hat and cape of my first fairy. And this time I'm going to use darker reds for her um, cape and like under her dress. In the movie, the Disney movie, it's kind of more brown, but I didn't want to bring in brown. I wanted to be all shades of the same color. So I thought using kind of more darker, richer jewel tone red as instead of brown, just would be prettier. So that's what I did for her. So I did start off with kind of more violet reds, and then I'm coming in with more pinky reds. So I do blend between the two shades of red just to try to make sure that they match and look like they coordinate. Um, but yeah, for the little kind of, I don't know, fabric that holds the hat on their head, I don't know what you would call that, a scarf of some sort. I just use the lightest shade of what I'm using. So my hat is a little bit lighter compared to Fauna's darker hat, but I do just bring out the lightest color shade that I'm working with and make that be kind of the little scarf that holds their hats onto their heads. I did accidentally color some of this fairy's hair as part of the scarf, but that's okay. It's pretty pale. So when I come in with darker shades of gray for her hair, it colors over just fine. Again, I use that yellow YO 2.3 to be their wands, which is the same shades of the crown and stars. Bringing back in those BGs to color in her wings, and then I will move on to her darker skin tone. I also really like the idea of adding in little stipple dots on my images. You can see I went back and did that for my princess's dress. I did it for the hat and gown or dress of my fairies. And then I also did it to the stars just to add a little bit of more cartoony dimension. I think people who color realistically are very talented, but I really love a cartoony colored look. So that's more my style. So whatever I can do to add in more of that cartoon look, I like to do, such as adding little stippling, and I'll bring in a white gel pen later to add some highlights. I also use it to hide any imperfections, such as all of the times I color outside the lines. I love coloring, but sometimes I'm not paying attention and I'll go out of the line. So using a white gel pen just covers those little areas. So like I said, for my last fairy, I'm going to give her some darker skin tone, darker gray hair. I did notice kind of an error in the stamp design. I think it's just like a layering thing. The kind of like end of her fabric or scarf that holds her hat just kind of randomly stops on her cape. I think it was supposed to be tucked under the cape in the layering of this design, but that's okay. I'm just going to color it a little darker right there so you can't see that it just kind of randomly stops. So Merryweather is blue, but I didn't want her to be the same kind of blue. It's not really teal, but the blue teal of my princess's dress. So more of a darker blue. I'm going to use those shades. So I'm going to use the bees. I've been really trying to focus again on the darker color for the hat and the cape to match my first fairy. I'm also going to bring in the darker colors at the center of her dress. So like she's kind of wearing a coat. So the dress part of her outfit will be darker as well. And then I'll use lighter colors for her coat or the top layer of her dress. So I'm really liking how my three fairies are turning out. I will say the only thing I don't like is the jump between B0.5 and B0.3. I wish there was a 0.4 or something in between these two shades. it's quite a big jump. So you're going to see I'm really trying to blend those together, adding a lot of ink, trying to make it look not so jumpy between the two. Unfortunately, I think this larger part of her coat doesn't look the best. I tried to add in a little more color by giving it some kind of dimension by putting in more color, like little flicks in towards the center. But you can see here, I'm trying so hard to blend these two together. I really wish there was another shade in between these two. It doesn't look bad. It turns out really cute. It's fine. I also layer my fairies onto my card to try to hide some of that. So, but that's just my only thing that if I could change, I wish there was one more blending color on that part of her outfit. So now I'm bringing in that white gel pen, going over any areas I went outside the lines, adding highlights, little white dots to their pink cheeks, just giving it, again, more cartoon look. I'm bringing in a clear shimmer glitter brush pen. This is from scrapbook.com. I'm coloring in any of the gold, so her crown, the fairies wands, the stars, and I did add a little bit to her dress. I feel like it's kind of hard to see. You can see it in person, but it's just not going to show very well on camera. And that finishes my coloring. So I'll go ahead and use the coordinating dies to cut them out. I've also grabbed a few supplies to make a shaker card. So I'm going to use this high frame plate from scrapbook.com, but I just want the border. It just was the simplest sentiment from my stash. So I have this half sheet of paper. This is from the Your Paper Insider box 4. So I know it looks like just white paper on camera, but it has a subtle texture to it. So I'm going to use this to create my frame. So since it is exactly a half sheet, it's going to fit right into the edges of my die. So I'm going to use some mint tape, which is a repositionable low tack tape. And I'm going to line up my paper to the edge and the corners to make sure it's not going to be, rotating in my die cut machine, that it stays pretty flush. This is a ridiculous step. Please feel free to just grab a larger piece of paper and cut out the frame. But like I said, I only had a half sheet of this left and I was determined to use it on today's card. So I die cut that out. I am going to save my little extra bits and I just tuck them into the back of my die. So that way next time I use it, if I need the negative pieces, I already have some cut. For the high, I'm just going to trim it out. So just following the inside edge of that frame and cutting out the sentiment. And again, I'll just throw that into my die cut packaging for a future use. If I don't use it in a couple months and next time I pull it out, I might just toss it, but I like saving my scraps. You never know. And then for the other half of that sheet of paper, I don't really care so much about it being lined up perfectly. I'm still going to do my best, but it's not as crucial. And I went ahead and cut out the spring floral decorative A2 plate also from scrapbook.com. And I did save all of the pieces, not all, but most of the pieces that popped out of the die because I'm going to use them as my shaker elements on the inside of my shaker. Now this is a very petite kind of edge, which is why I didn't want to make a shaker just with this panel because it's just not a lot of stability on those edges. So I'm going to glue this piece first to a sheet of acetate that I also trimmed to be A2 in size. And I did use liquid glue, which is not always my favorite for making shakers. But like I said, this is a very dainty design and I could have probably been smart and added a double-sided adhesive to the back of the cardstock before I die cut it out, but that's okay. So I glued that to my acetate. Next, I'm going to take some 1/4-inch double-sided adhesive roll and I'm going to cover all 4 sides of the back of my frame. I peeled off the release paper and now I'm lining it to the front of my shaker window panel. So now I have a much thicker frame around the 4 sides and I'm going to use that to hide my adhesive. I'm going to use 2 strips of this 3mm thick foam adhesive from scrapbook.com. I'm just using the 1/8 of an inch strip, so I really have room for a 1/4 inch. So like I said, I'm going to do 2 layers all the way around. I'm peeled off all of the release paper and I'm actually going to use my Misty here. I took out the foam pad and the magnets so there's some room like you would use it as a rubber stamp, and I placed it into the Misty with the obviously sticky side up for the foam adhesive. I put in those little extra pieces, those white pieces, die cuts from the Floral plate. And then I poured in a bunch of satin gold sequin from This Calls for Confetti. And those are going to be my shaker elements. I thought they matched the gold of my princess's crown the best. So that's why I picked that color. I'm aligning the top edge of my um, shaker window into my Misty, and then I'm taking my card base and lining up to that top corner as well and placing it on. That's, I think, one of the easiest ways to make sure you get your panel onto your card base straight and not make a huge mess of spilling all your little shaker bits everywhere. So that closed up our shaker panel. Nice, quick, and easy card. I like the tone on tone of the white behind the white and also the white shaker elements and then the pop of gold. So now I'm going to layer my fairies onto the card. I really like them kind of in the upper right hand corner and my princess in the lower left hand corner, giving it kind of a across diagonal across the card. And then for the sentiment, I really like the I'm 99% sure you're a princess. I think that's a cute little sentiment. So I'm going to grab that stamp set out and I'm going to stamp it on some white cardstock and black ink just to match the black outline that I have for my images. I thought about embossing it in gold, but I didn't. I already feel like this card took long enough with all the coloring. I know I edit out quite a bit in between selecting markers and I also speed up a lot. So this video is already going to be, I think, like over 20. I'm already over 20 minutes right now. So probably like a 24-minute video. So I thought I'd keep the card a little more on the simple side, but you could also emboss that sentiment in gold and I think it would look really pretty. So I'm just going to use some liquid adhesive to attach my princess and my fairies. There's already a lot of dimension on this card because it is a shaker card. So just adding them on, you can see I strategically tried to hide some of that blue of my fairy that I didn't really care for. And then I also glued on my sentiment. I'm going to use a jewel picker and just kind of play with the design of where I'm adding the stars, and then I use liquid adhesive to glue all of those down as well. And that will finish off my card. I didn't add any more shine or glitter, surprisingly. I just like the sequins in the background. And there is, again, some subtle shine that's really hard to see on camera that I added to the stars and her crown and her dress. So there is some shine in the card. But I hope you enjoyed today's Fandom Friday process video. I hope you got some tips from the coloring, or at least the marker colors for future use, and how I put together a shaker panel card. Thanks for joining me. Let me know again if you have any ideas for me in the future for a Fandom Friday video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!